This is chapter 24, verse 19 of the Holy Quran. And its English translation is, "Those who love that scandal should circulate respecting those who believe. For them is a grievous chastisement in this world and the hereafter. And Allah knows while you know not. O you who believe, enter not houses other than your own until you have asked permission and saluted their inmates. This is better for you that you may be mindful." I have picked these verses for today's khutbah because of the recent events that have taken place. And that is the trial that came to an end of the managers and editors of the News of the World. And that trial was based on the fact that there had been illegal snooping, hacking into the telephones and emails and mobile phones and so on of people against whom the News of the World wanted to start a propaganda campaign, such as David Blunkett, the ex-Home Secretary. And that trial, and in fact the Leveson inquiry before that trial, laid bare how essential it is to have strict privacy laws to protect the individual from snooping of powerful elements. And media has become a very powerful element in not only in the West, wherever they have been given freedom, they have used it sometimes for good and sometimes for bad. And that is exactly why laws are needed to protect you and me against their incursions into our private lives. And the Holy Quran has a beautiful way of putting things in that it takes an incident that happened at the time of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and describes it in such a way that all of us, hundreds of years later, can draw lessons from that incident and what happened and apply them to the culture and the society and the time that we live in. This particular verse, of course, was related to the time when the hypocrites in Medina and the non-believers started a rumor campaign against Hazrat Aisha radhiyallahu ta'ala. And the Holy Prophet was much grieved by this campaign. And eventually God cleared Hazrat Aisha radhiyallahu ta'ala of all charges. And you know, in this day and age, we are told that Muslim women are very submissive and they don't have a voice. But I admire greatly Hazrat Aisha, for when God cleared her of these charges, the Holy Prophet went to her father's house where she was staying and said, "Aisha, Allah has cleared you of all charges. Come home." And Hazrat Aisha stood up. And Hazrat Abu Bakr radhiyallahu ta'ala said, "Daughter, are you not going to thank the Prophet of Allah?" And she said, "No. I shall thank the one who cleared me of all these charges. I shall thank Allah." That shows the courage and self-confidence that Islam instilled in the believing men and the believing women. But that's a aside. So the Holy Quran says there are those who love to make scandal. And of course, journalists who work for the news of the world, because their bonuses and salaries and the facilities they were given depended on how much rumor mongering they did exactly these things. What good it did society to hack into the phone of a murdered girl and leave messages making her family think that she was still alive and receiving messages, is something that is despicable. And really, there was an element of criminality in that. And that is how those people should have been punished. And this is what the Holy Quran says, that those who do these things, although it specifically talks about false charges against women, give them 80 stripes. But if you look at the distress her parents went through, is she alive? Is she dead? What is happening to her? And not for one day, but for weeks, until it became clear that she had been murdered and that someone else had been leaving those messages on her telephone. In Pakistan, they say that the heaviest funeral or the heaviest coffin on a parent's shoulder is that of their child, because it upsets the natural sequence that we have all come to expect of the way this world works. And God says, for them is a grievous chastisement in this world and in the hereafter. So let's look at what happened to these people. One day, Rebecca Brooks, although she has been found innocent, and Andy Coulson, I think his name was, and other journalists who worked for News of the World, who were they rubbing shoulders with? The Prime Minister, the Queen. They were at the helm of government, amongst the most powerful in this country. And indeed, they were so powerful that the Prime Minister was scared of upsetting News of the World and Rupert Murdoch and others who worked there. Whether it was Tony Blair, whether it was David Cameron, they all curried favor with them. They gave them jobs in the government, highly paid jobs. They attended cabinet meetings. They were privy to secrets that none of us knew. And in this world, they were punished because of the way they were humiliated, by the way their homes were raided, by the way they were arrested and bundled into police vans in front of their neighbors, the way they were kept at police cells and questions for hours upon hours upon hours. Rebecca Brooks says she's innocent. I have to correct that. She has been found not guilty. There is a big difference between being innocent and there not being enough evidence for a jury to convict you. She was the editor of one of the most powerful newspapers in this country, so she should be, and she said that one thing that she always aspired to was to be very accurate in her stories. So be accurate in your own story as well. You've been found not guilty for lack of evidence. There is a vast sea of difference between being innocent and being found not guilty. But then later on in the same chapter, verse 24, God says, O you who believe, enter not houses apart from your own without asking permission. And of course at that time, the only place where you could snoop or go was a physical structure, a house. And in fact, the Holy Prophet was asked this question. He was asked, O Prophet of Allah, why is it that when you go and knock on a door, in fact, some of those houses didn't have doors, they just had curtains, and you say Assalamu alaikum, why do you stand to one side? And he said, because it's un-Islamic and unlawful in Islam to glance into a house while you're waiting for the person to come and answer the door, or when they open the door to let you in or say, sorry, I'm busy. Remember, people said, sorry, I'm busy to the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And because he acted on the Holy Quran, he would make to go. You try saying that to any of your relatives or friends who come and say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm very busy. Even if you're in the bath, you're supposed to leap out and rush down and greet them. There is an incident when the Holy Prophet went and he knocked on the door and he said, Assalamu alaikum, and there was no reply. So he said, Assalamu alaikum again, and there was no reply. And he said, Assalamu alaikum again 3 times, as you're required to do, as the Holy Quran says, and there was no reply. And he made to leave. And then the companion came rushing out. So the Holy Prophet said, why did you not open the door to me the first time? And the companion said, the last Prophet of Allah, who is a blessing for the humanity, was standing outside and saying to me, peace and blessings of Allah be upon you. And I wanted him to send as much peace and blessings of Allah upon me as possible. Not that I didn't want to see you or meet you. That's why I didn't come and answer the door for you. But the Holy Prophet was asked, why do you stand to one side? And he said, well, in case someone opens the door and I can see into the house. I have not been invited into the house as yet. So this will be snooping. And then later on, someone said, well, the Holy Prophet only said, don't look into the house. What about if you can hear? And it was said that that is also snooping. There is an incident when Hazrat Umar and another companion, after the Holy Prophet ﷺ had passed away, were passing through the streets of Medina, and they heard something going on in a house which they thought was not proper and correct and so on. And Hazrat Umar stopped for a minute, and then suddenly he turned to his companion and said, do you think we are snooping? And he said, yes. What they're doing in the privacy of their home is between them and God. So Hazrat Umar said, let's leave. This is the man of whom everyone was terrified, from the southernmost part of Arabia to Egypt and Turkey and India. Another time, Hazrat Umar, he heard something again, and he climbed the back wall of the house and said to the man, why shouldn't I punish you? And the man said, oh Umar, punish yourself first. And Hazrat Umar radiallahu ta'ala said, and why should I punish myself? And the man said, I broke one commandment of the Quran. You broke how many commandments? One, you climbed over the back wall of the house, and the Quran says, do not enter houses of people by climbing over their back walls. Go to the front and knock on the door. Number one. So you broke that commandment of the Holy Quran. Number two, we are forbidden to snoop. So you snooped. This is why you thought there was something untoward going on in this house. And then, so he carried on. So Hazrat Umar then asked his pardon and left without saying anything further. What I'm pointing out is how strict Islamic law is about privacy, that even when the head of state, Hazrat Umar, found something that was going on in private, he was not allowed to snoop. And even when he found evidence of what was happening, he was not allowed to put that evidence to test in a court because it was obtained by snooping. some of these laws, people say that we are trying to implement Sharia in this country, in the United States. And it occurred to me to give a series of khutbas on the fact that, and I have a heading in mind, something like deal with it. Sharia has been here for years. The laws against admission of such evidence in a court of law to prove someone's guilt are inadmissible. Why? Because of what happened to Hazrat Umar. That is implementing Sharia. Every day we see advertisements on television, make a will. What does the Quran says? Make a will. That is Sharia. Quran says, when you give evidence, speak the truth, whoever it's against, your law makes you swear an oath of the Quran to say you will do that. That is Sharia. You are making laws against snooping, against hacking into private conversations on mobile phones and over the internet and so on. The Quran is telling you to do this in these verses of the Holy Quran. Of course, at that time, there were only physical houses that instructions could be given about. But then it does not mean to say that as time develops and things change, then you do not look at the principles that are laid down in these verses of the Holy Quran and apply them to your time and your place. And many people dispute about this with me. And I simply ask them, why does Pakistan have nuclear weapons? Quran says, have strong horses ready at the border to confront the enemy. How many millions of horses are there on the borders of any Muslim country to confront the enemy? Why have you got tanks? Why have you got jet fighters? Why have you got fighter bombers? Why have you got an atom bomb? Why have you got a navy? Why have you got missiles? Why haven't you got strong horses? Why is it that it's only where killing someone is involved? You are going to use ijtihad and interpret the Holy Quran and verses of the Holy Quran and apply them at your time and in your country. What about the rest of it? Surely this applies to the whole of the teaching of the Holy Quran. So these verses, and you can see, first it was said, don't enter into people's homes without knocking. Then the Holy Prophet expanded it and said, well, when you go and knock, don't stand in such a position so that when they open the door, you can see inside. Then it was expanded further to say, well, make sure you can't even hear what is going on inside the house. Because you don't want to snoop, don't want to interfere in people's private affairs and what is going on inside their house. So this has been developing since it was revealed. It was interpreted further by the Holy Prophet, and we are perfectly entitled to say that these verses apply and they mean don't snoop on people by any means, whether it is by hacking into their internet account or whether it is by hacking into their mobile phone account or by opening their mail or whatever else that may be available to you. And sometimes people ask me, why is this Jamaat needed? This Jamaat is needed exactly for this purpose. They all, the rest of them, want to take you back 1500 years. They don't want to make laws about what to do when a car is speeding. They want to make laws about what to do when someone is speeding on a horse or a camel. They don't want to use the Holy Quran and its commandments to address the problems that face us today. In no Muslim mosque in this country will you find a khutbah today about Wonga, their 5,866% rate of interest on which they loan money, and asking the question, usury is illegal in this country and ask the government, what is your definition of usury if 5,866% rate of interest is not usury? Our khutbas are about things that happened 1500 years ago. They have no relevance to the young today. This is why young are being misguided, and they are taking the kind of action that we see on television. This is why, although Muslims are, I think, 2% of the population of this country, Muslims are 10% of the prison population. And this is why this Jamaat is needed, to show people that the Holy Quran is still relevant. And when it says it has a message for all people, for all time, it means that you need to look into its pages and look at how its commands apply in our country at our time.